My daughter went missing during school lunch, and when I found her, I was even more heartbroken. The school called me at 12:47. My daughter Maya had disappeared during lunch period. She'd been seen walking toward the cafeteria with her class, but when they did head count afterward, she wasn't there. I worked 10 minutes from Riverside Elementary, and I broke every speed limit getting there. The principal, Mrs. Davies, met me at the entrance, her face tight with worry. We've checked every classroom, bathroom, and closet, the playground, the library, the nurse's office. She's not in the building. I asked if they'd called the police, and she said they were about to, but wanted to search thoroughly first. It had only been 20 minutes. I felt my chest tighten with panic. Maya was 8 years old, shy, quiet, the kind of kid who followed rules and never wandered off. This wasn't like her at all. The security footage showed Maya walking down the main hallway toward the cafeteria at 11:52. Then nothing. She never made it to lunch. The cameras didn't catch her leaving the building, which meant she had to be somewhere inside, but they'd looked everywhere. I started searching myself, calling her name through empty hallways. Other teachers joined in, their voices echoing off the walls. Maya, sweetie, if you can hear me, it's okay to come out. Nothing. I checked her classroom again, looking under desks and inside the supply closet. Her backpack was still hanging on her hook, her jacket folded neatly beneath it. Everything exactly where it should be, except Maya. I was pulling out my phone to call 911 when I noticed something. Maya's lunchbox was missing from her backpack. She always kept it in the front pocket, but it wasn't there now. Mrs. Davies said the cafeteria workers hadn't seen her come through the line. So where had she taken her lunch? I thought about the building layout, trying to remember every corner and space. Then I remembered the old stairwell near the gym, the one they'd blocked off 2 years ago when they renovated. They'd put up a chain across the entrance, but never actually locked the door behind it. I ran toward the gym, my heart pounding. The chain was still up, but when I pushed on the door, it opened. The stairwell was dark, lit only by a small window at the landing. I started down the stairs, moving slowly, listening, and then I heard it. Quiet crying coming from below. Maya! I called out, rushing down the rest of the stairs. She was sitting on the bottom step, her lunchbox open beside her. Her face was red and blotchy from crying, and when she saw me, she started sobbing harder. I dropped to my knees and pulled her into my arms. Baby, what happened? Why are you down here? Everyone's been looking everywhere for you. She couldn't speak at first, just cried into my shoulder while I held her. Finally, she pulled back and wiped her face with shaky hands. I didn't want anyone to see, she whispered. See what, honey? She opened her lunchbox with trembling fingers. Inside was the lunch I'd packed that morning. A sandwich, apple slices, crackers, a juice box. The same lunch I packed every single day because it was all we could afford. I make $6 an hour at the grocery store, and after rent and bills, there's barely anything left. Maya pulled out the sandwich and held it up. The kids make fun of my lunch, she said, her voice breaking. They say only poor people eat white bread sandwiches, that my apple slices are brown because we can't afford fresh fruit, that I'm the only one who doesn't buy hot lunch or bring fancy stuff. My heart shattered. All this time I thought I was doing okay, that as long as she had food, it didn't matter what kind. But I'd been so focused on just surviving that I hadn't seen what it was costing her. Emma brings sushi, Maya continued. Tyler has fancy sandwiches from the organic store, and I have this. She gestured at the plain sandwich with shaking hands. I started hiding down here 3 weeks ago so no one would see me eat. The shame in her eyes broke something in me that couldn't be fixed. My 8-year-old daughter had been hiding in a dark stairwell for 3 weeks, eating alone, because she was embarrassed by the lunch I packed with my own hands. But what she told me next about why she never said anything made me realize the damage went even deeper than I thought. The rest of the story is on my channel or linked below. Maya's voice was barely audible. I didn't want you to feel bad, Mom. You work so hard, and I didn't want you to know that. Her voice broke, and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. I pulled her closer, my own tears falling into her hair as I held her. The dark stairwell suddenly felt suffocating, the weight of my daughter's confession crushing my chest. Why didn't you feel like you could tell me, baby? I asked, my voice trembling. Maya wiped her nose with her sleeve. Because you always look so tired when you come home. And when you pack my lunch, you look proud, like you're doing something good. She looked up at me with eyes too old for her 8-year-old face. I didn't want to make you sad. The fact that my child had been protecting me when I should have been protecting her made me feel like the worst mother in the world. All this time, I thought I was doing enough keeping a roof over our heads, making sure she had food to eat, but I'd missed something crucial happening right in front of me. How long has this been going on, Maya? The teasing about your lunch? She stared at her hands. Since the beginning of the school year. It got worse after Emma's birthday party, the one I wasn't invited to. 4 months. My daughter had been suffering for 4 months while I remained oblivious, too exhausted from working double shifts to notice the signs. Who else besides Emma and Tyler? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Most of the kids in my class. Not all of them say mean things, but they laugh. She pulled out her juice box, the generic brand I bought in bulk when it was on sale. They call this poor people juice and say the apple slices are brown because we can't afford real apples. Each word felt like a knife twisting in my heart. I gathered her things and helped her to her feet. We're gonna talk to Mrs. Davies right now. Maya's eyes widened in panic. No, please, Mom, it'll just make everything worse. Maya, this is bullying. The school needs to address it. She clutched my hand tightly as we made our way back to the main hallway. The relief on Mrs. Davies' face when she saw Maya quickly turned to confusion when I told her we needed to speak privately in her office. Once seated, with Maya nervously perched on the chair beside me, I explained what I discovered. Mrs. Davies' expression shifted from concern to something that looked uncomfortably like pity. I understand your concern, Miss Johnson, but this sort of thing is fairly normal among children this age. They notice differences and sometimes comment on them. It's part of growing up. I felt heat rising in my face. My daughter has been hiding in a stairwell for 3 weeks because she's being mocked for the food I can afford to give her. I guess that's not normal kid stuff. That's bullying based on economic status, and it needs to be addressed. Perspectivations of their already won the nations. That's not normal kid stuff. Mrs. Davies sighed, folding her hands on her desk. We can certainly speak to the students involved, but children will be children. Perhaps Maya is being a bit sensitive. Sensitive? I interrupted, my voice rising. She's 8 years old and being shamed for something completely beyond her control. Maya's hand tightened around mine, and I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. I want to know what specific actions you're going to take to address this, I said firmly. Mrs. Davies offered vague assurances about having a talk with the class about kindness and respect, but I could tell she wasn't taking the situation seriously. When she suggested that perhaps Maya could join the subsidized lunch program to avoid these issues, I'd heard enough. I'm taking Maya home for the rest of the day, I said, standing up, and I expect this to be addressed properly before she returns tomorrow. In the car, Maya was quiet, staring out the window as we drove home. The silence was heavy with all the things I should have noticed sooner. I'm so sorry, baby, I finally said. I should have realized something was wrong. It's not your fault, she whispered. I got really good at hiding it. At a red light, I turned to look at her. Maya, I need you to promise me something. No more secrets like this, okay? Even if you think it will make me sad or worried, especially then. That's my job as your mom, to worry about you and fix what I can. She nodded, but didn't look convinced. At home, I made hot chocolate a rare treat and sat with Maya at our small kitchen table. Slowly, more details emerged. How Emma had once dumped Maya's lunch into the trash while everyone laughed, and how Tyler had taken photos of her sandwich and shared them with other kids. How she'd started saying she wasn't hungry just so she wouldn't have to eat in front of them. I tried eating in the bathroom first, she admitted, tears welling up again. But a teacher caught me and said it wasn't sanitary. That's when I found the stairwell. Heart broke all over again as I imagined my little girl, hunched alone in that dark space day after day, ashamed of the lunch I'd packed with love. The worst part, Maya said, her voice catching, is that I started throwing away my lunch sometimes. I know we don't have a lot of money, and you work so hard, but I just couldn't eat it with everyone watching and laughing. She looked up at me, devastated. I'm sorry, Mom. I know wasting food is bad. I pulled her onto my lap, even though she was getting too big for it, and held her as she cried against my shoulder. My baby had been going hungry because of cruelty I hadn't protected her from. That night, after Maya was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with a notepad, making plans. The school might not take this seriously, but I would. Something had to change. My daughter deserved to eat her lunch without shame, regardless of what we could or couldn't afford. I looked at the contents of our refrigerator and pantry, calculating what I could do differently without spending more money we didn't have. But the truth was painfully clear. No matter how I repackaged it, we couldn't compete with sushi and organic sandwiches. I closed my eyes, exhausted but determined. This wasn't just about lunch anymore. It was about my daughter's dignity, and I would fight with everything I had to protect that. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Maya hunched alone in that dark stairwell, hiding from the cruelty of children whose parents could afford fancy lunches. I kept thinking about what Mrs. Davies had said, that this was normal kid stuff. Maybe to her, but not to me, and certainly not to my daughter. The next morning, I made Maya's lunch with shaking hands. White bread sandwich with turkey and cheese, apple slices carefully treated with lemon juice to keep them from browning, crackers, and her juice box. I stared at it, seeing it through the eyes of Emma and Tyler and the other kids who had turned these simple items into weapons against my child. You don't have to go back today if you don't want to, I told Maya as she picked at her cereal. I told Maya goes like this. She looked up, her eyes still puffy from yesterday's tears. I have to go back sometime. 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 I know, baby, but maybe we could take another day, figure some things out. Maya shook her head. Miss Wilson is doing the butterfly habitat today. I've been waiting all month. I nodded, my heart aching at how resilient she was trying to be. Okay, but promise me something. If anything happens, anything at all, you go straight to the office and call me. After dropping Maya off, I called into work. I couldn't concentrate on stocking shelves when my daughter was suffering. My supervisor wasn't happy, but I didn't care. Some things were more important than $6 an hour. Instead of going home, I parked across from the school and waited. At exactly 11:50, I walked through the front doors, signed in as a visitor, and made my way toward the cafeteria. I needed to see for myself what Maya was experiencing. The noise hit me first, the chaotic symphony of children's voices bouncing off hard surfaces. I stood near the entrance, scanning the room until I spotted Maya's class filing in. My daughter was at the back of the line, her shoulders hunched forward like she was trying to disappear. I watched as she sat at the very end of a table, leaving space between herself and the other children. She placed her lunch on the table but didn't open it, just stared at it like it might bite her. A few seats away, I recognized Emma from Maya's description. Perfectly braided hair, designer backpack, opening what looked like a bento box filled with colorful foods. Ew, what is that smell? Emma's voice carried across the table. Oh, it's just poor people food again. A boy next to her, Tyler, I assumed, laughed and pointed at another child's sandwich. Dude, is that bologna? My mom says only trash people eat bologna because it's made of animal butts. The little boy with the bologna sandwich turned red and quickly wrapped it back up, shoving it into his lunchbox. I watched in horror as he pulled his knees to his chest and stared at the table, refusing to eat anything else. Maya hadn't even opened her lunch. She just sat there, enduring, waiting for the torture to end. I felt rage building in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm as I approached the cafeteria supervisor, a tired-looking woman monitoring the room from a high stool. Excuse me, I said. I'm Maya Johnson's mother. I'm concerned about some bullying that's happening during lunch. The woman barely glanced at me. Kids will be kids. We break up fights if they happen, but we can't police every comment. These aren't just comments, I insisted. Children are being shamed for the food their parents can afford. My daughter has been hiding in a stairwell to avoid eating here. She sighed like I was being dramatic. Look, we have 150 kids to supervise for 25 minutes. We make sure no one throws food or hits each other. We can't monitor every conversation. So you're telling me it's acceptable for children to go hungry because other kids are mocking their lunches? She finally looked at me directly. I'm telling you it's not my job to make sure your kid feels good about her sandwich. Take it up with administration if you have a problem. I stood there, stunned by her callousness, as she walked away to break up an argument at another table. Looking back at Maya, I saw her finally open her lunch, take a single bite of her sandwich, then close it again. My heart broke, watching her pretend to be full after barely eating anything. That afternoon, I started making calls. First to other parents I knew from Maya's class, then to parents whose contact information I found in the school directory. By evening, I had spoken with 7 other families who had experienced similar issues. Theo comes home starving every day, one mother told me. He says he's not hungry at lunch, but I know something's wrong. He never used to be like this. Another parent confessed. Zoe begs me to buy the expensive snacks she sees other kids with. When I can't afford them, she asks to stay home sick. I never connected it to lunch shaming. We agreed to meet at the local library the next evening. 12 parents showed up, most of them working multiple jobs, all of them struggling to keep their children fed and happy. As we shared stories, a pattern emerged. Our children were being systematically excluded and shamed for their economic status, and the school was doing nothing about it. My son started hiding in the bathroom during lunch, one father said, his voice breaking. A teacher found him eating on the floor of a stall. They gave him detention for being out of bounds. That night, I went online and researched how to make inexpensive food look more appealing. I bought a cheap bento-style container at the dollar store and stayed up late, cutting Maya's sandwich into shapes, arranging arranging apple slices into a flower pattern, adding a few colorful toothpicks I found in the back of a drawer. It wasn't sushi or organic produce, but maybe it would help her feel less different. The next morning, Maya looked at her transformed lunch with wide eyes. "It's pretty," she said softly. "Is it okay?" I asked. "I tried to make it special, but it's still the same food." She nodded, carefully placing it in her backpack. "Thanks, Mom." But when I picked her up that afternoon, I knew immediately it hadn't worked. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and she clutched her backpack to her chest like armor. "What happened?" I asked once we were in the car. "Emma said I was trying to pretend I wasn't poor," she whispered. "She said fancy containers don't hide cheap food." I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. "Did you eat anything?" Maya shook her head. I went back to the stairwell. Mrs. Davies said she talked to everyone about being kind, but it just made things worse. Now they're more careful when teachers are around, but meaner when they're not. That evening, I emptied my meager savings account and went to the grocery store, buying things I could barely afford: organic juice boxes, name-brand crackers, fancy bread. I knew it was financially irresponsible, but what choice did I have? My child was going hungry because of shame. When I showed Maya the new lunch supplies, her reaction wasn't what I expected. "I don't want to eat in the cafeteria anymore, Mom," she said quietly. "Even with different food, can I just eat somewhere else, please?" I sat down next to her on the couch, pulling her close. "Oh, baby, this isn't right. You shouldn't have to hide." "I'm just tired," she whispered against my shoulder. "I'm tired of them looking at me like I'm nothing." That night, after Maya was asleep, I sat at our kitchen table with the other parents' phone numbers and a determination that burned in my chest. If the school wouldn't protect our children, we would have to do it ourselves. This wasn't just about lunch anymore, it was about dignity, and every child deserved that, regardless of what their parents could afford. After that night of rage and planning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in days. The parents' meeting at the library had given me something I desperately needed: the knowledge that we weren't alone in this struggle. Today, I was going to confront the source of the problem directly. I'm meeting with Emma and Tyler's parents after school. I told Maya as I packed her lunch, still the basic sandwich, apple slices, and juice box. No more pretending we could afford what we couldn't. Maya's eyes widened with alarm. "Mom, please don't. They'll just make everything worse." I knelt down to her level. "Sometimes adults need to talk to other adults about how their children are behaving. This isn't your battle to fight alone, sweetie." She looked unconvinced but nodded reluctantly. I'd called both families the night before, presenting it as a friendly discussion about classroom dynamics. Emma's mother had sounded annoyed but agreed to meet at the school library at 4:30. Tyler's father said he could spare 15 minutes between meetings. The school day crawled by as I waited tables at my second job, the lunch shift at a diner where the manager let me leave early. By 4:15, I was sitting in the school library, rehearsing what I'd say when they arrived. Emma's mother, Vanessa, arrived first, perfectly highlighted hair, designer handbag, and an expression of barely concealed impatience. Tyler's father, Richard, walked in 5 minutes late, still on his phone, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Thank you both for coming," I began once they were seated. "I wanted to discuss something concerning that's been happening during lunch periods." "Is this about the fundraiser?" Vanessa interrupted. "Because I've already committed to chairing the spring auction." "No, it's about lunch shaming," I said firmly. "Your children, Emma and Tyler, have been bullying my daughter Maya and other kids about the food their parents can afford to pack them." The silence that followed was thick with tension. Richard put his phone down slowly, his expression darkening. "Bullying is a serious accusation," he said coldly. "It is serious," I agreed. "Maya has been hiding in a stairwell during lunch because your son and Emma mock her poor people food and encourage others to do the same." Vanessa's perfectly arched eyebrows rose. "Children notice differences. Emma has high standards. We've raised her to appreciate quality." "High standards?" I repeated incredulously. "She dumped my daughter's lunch in the trash and called it garbage." "Well," Vanessa said with a dismissive wave, "perhaps there's a lesson here about economic reality. Not everyone can afford organic lunches, and children need to understand that." My hands began to shake. The lesson should be about kindness, not economic disparities. Richard leaned forward, his expensive watch glinting under the fluorescent lights. "Look, Miss Johnson, I understand you're upset, but maybe instead of complaining about what other children bring to school, you should focus on improving your own situation." "Excuse me? I'm just saying," he continued, checking his phone again. "There are plenty of opportunities out there. If you got a better job, you could afford better lunches for your daughter." The casual cruelty of his words knocked the wind out of me. "I work 2 jobs already," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "This isn't about my employment. It's about your children deliberately humiliating others for their economic status." "My Tyler is just honest," Richard shrugged. "Kids need to develop thick skin. The real world isn't going to coddle them." "They're 8 years old," I exclaimed. "They don't need to develop thick skin. They need to eat lunch without being tormented." Vanessa sighed dramatically. "Perhaps you should consider the free lunch program, then Maya would have the same food as everyone else." "That's not the point," I said through gritted teeth. "The point is that your children are creating a hostile environment based on class differences, and it needs to stop." "Well, class differences exist," Richard said bluntly. "Better they learn it now than be shocked by it later." The meeting deteriorated from there. Every attempt I made to discuss concrete solutions was met with dismissals, deflections, or thinly veiled suggestions that my financial situation was somehow a personal failing. After 20 minutes, Richard announced he had another meeting and left without a backward glance. Vanessa lingered just long enough to say, "Emma means well. Perhaps Maya is just being oversensitive." I sat alone in the library after they left, shaking with rage and frustration. How could they be so blind, so callous? Their children were causing real harm, and they couldn't or wouldn't see it. That night, after Maya was asleep, I opened my laptop and navigated to the Riverside Elementary Parent Forum. I created an anonymous account and began typing, "Has anyone else's child experienced lunch shaming at Riverside? My daughter has been hiding during lunch period because classmates mock her poor people food." When I approached the administration, I was told this was normal kid stuff. When I met with the parents of the children involved, I was told to get a better job so my daughter could have better lunches. Is economic bullying acceptable at our school now? I hit post and closed my laptop, not expecting much response. The next morning, my phone was buzzing with notifications. My post had exploded overnight, with dozens of parents sharing similar experiences. My son cried because kids said his off-brand sneakers were for poor people. My daughter begged me for a $200 backpack because her classmates called her current one trash. My twins pretend to forget their lunches so they can get cafeteria food instead of being teased for homemade meals. The stories kept coming, each one more heartbreaking than the last. By afternoon, someone had shared the thread with a local news reporter who covered education issues. She messaged me, asking for an interview. "This is bigger than just lunches," she wrote. "This This is about economic discrimination in public education. I agreed to meet her anonymously, sharing my documentation of incidents and the school's dismissive response. 2 days later, the headline ran, Economic Bullying, the Hidden Crisis at Riverside Elementary. The article detailed how children from lower-income families were being systematically ostracized, with school officials turning a blind eye. It included quotes from multiple parents and statistics on the psychological impact of lunch shaming. Principal Davies called me the morning the article was published, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. Miss Johnson, I understand you've been speaking to the press about alleged incidents at our school. They're not alleged, I said calmly. They're documented, and I'm not the only parent who's experienced this. You should have come to me before taking this public, she said. This kind of negative attention damages our school's reputation. I did come to you, I reminded her. You called it normal kid stuff and suggested Maya was being sensitive. She was silent for a moment. The school board has called an emergency meeting for tomorrow evening to address these concerns. I expect you'll be there? I wouldn't miss it, I replied. That evening, I gathered with the parents I'd met at the library. Together, we organized our evidence emails to teachers that had gone unanswered, notes from meetings with administrators, testimonials from our children. We prepared a presentation that couldn't be dismissed as oversensitive, parents overreacting. The board meeting was packed. Parents I'd never met approached me, whispering thanks for finally bringing this issue to light. Emma's mother sat near the front, her face a mask of indignation. Tyler's father was noticeably absent. When my turn came to speak, I stood at the podium with steady hands and a clear voice. This isn't about expensive lunches or name-brand clothes, I began. This is about children being taught that their worth is determined by what their parents can afford. It's about school officials who look the other way while kids go hungry rather than face ridicule. It's about a culture that tells 8-year-olds they should be ashamed of white bread sandwiches and generic juice boxes. I presented our evidence methodically, the pattern of incidents, the administrative dismissals, the psychological impact on our children. As I spoke, I could see the board members' expressions shifting from skepticism to concern. My daughter Maya is smart, kind, and creative, I concluded. She deserves to eat her lunch in peace, regardless of what's in it. Every child in this school deserves that basic dignity, and if the current administration can't ensure that, then perhaps we need leadership that can. The silence when I finished was deafening. Then, from the back of the room, someone started to applaud. Others joined in until the sound filled the space. Principal Davies stared at me from the side of the room, her expression unreadable. But I wasn't looking at her anymore. I was looking at Maya, sitting with a friend's parent, her face glowing with something I hadn't seen in months. Pride. The battle wasn't over, not by a long shot. But for the first time since finding my daughter hiding in that stairwell, I felt hope. Something was finally going to change. The school board meeting lasted nearly 3 hours. By the end, my voice was hoarse from speaking, my hands cramped from gripping the podium, but we had won. The board voted unanimously to implement a comprehensive anti-bullying program focused specifically on economic differences. It's a start, I told the group of parents who gathered around me afterward, as their faces showing the same mixture of exhaustion and hope that I felt. But we need to make sure they follow through. Principal Davies approached me as the crowd dispersed, her expression carefully neutral. Miss Johnson, I'd like to schedule a meeting with you tomorrow to discuss implementation details. The board has appointed you to the oversight committee. I nodded, too tired for any sense of triumph. I'll be there. That night, Maya watched me from the doorway of our tiny kitchen as I made her lunch for the next day, the same white bread sandwich, apple slices, crackers, and juice box. Mom? Her voice was small. Do I have to go back to the cafeteria now? I knelt down to her level. Not until you're ready, sweetheart. Change takes time. What if Emma and Tyler are still mean? I brushed her hair back from her face. Then we'll deal with it together. But I think things might start getting better. 2 weeks later, I walked into Riverside Elementary to find the cafeteria transformed. The long tables had been replaced with smaller round ones, each with a mix of grade levels. Teachers now ate with students instead of at their separate table, and a new schedule rotated which classes ate together each week. Mrs. Wilson, the 3rd grade teacher who'd volunteered to oversee the changes, gave me a tour. We've implemented friendship lunches where kids are randomly assigned seats twice a week. The other days they choose, but we monitor to prevent exclusion. I watched as a cafeteria aide gently redirected a group of girls who were whispering and pointing at another student's lunch. We're training all staff to recognize and address lunch shaming immediately, Mrs. Wilson explained. No more looking the other way. The most surprising change came in the form of an anonymous lunch donation program. Parents could contribute to a fund that provided specialty items, organic snacks, name brand treats, fancy juice boxes that were discreetly distributed among students whose families couldn't afford them. The idea is that no one knows which items came from home and which came from donations, Mrs. Wilson said. It levels the playing field without singling anyone out. Maya still wasn't ready to eat in the cafeteria, but she'd moved from the stairwell to the art room, where Miss Perez welcomed kids who needed a quieter space. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. One evening, I was setting up for the first of our affordable lunch workshops at the community center when Emma's mother, Vanessa, walked in. I nearly dropped the stack of recipe cards I was holding. I didn't expect to see you here, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. Vanessa looked uncomfortable, clutching her designer purse like a shield. I saw the flyer at school. I thought, maybe I could help. I raised an eyebrow. With affordable lunches, she had the grace to look embarrassed. I know it sounds ridiculous, but I saw something last week that made me think about our conversation differently. She just was enter outer can 6 mensless, is also sense be crises where I made a dot like our intense donation. She told me about visiting the school for a parent-teacher conference and witnessing a little boy hiding his lunch under the table when other kids approached. He looked exactly like Emma did when she was being bullied in preschool for her speech impediment. That same shame, that same fear. I suddenly realized what you were trying to tell me. I didn't know what to say. I hadn't expected this turn of events. I don't know how to make inexpensive lunches, she admitted. I've never had to think about it, but I can help organize or donate supplies or something. It was an olive branch, awkward and uncertain but genuine. I handed her a stack of flyers. You can help me set up the tables. By the 3rd week, our workshop had grown from 8 participants to 27. Parents shared recipes and money-saving tips, and even started a meal prep group that met on Sundays to prepare lunches for the week ahead. I taught them how to make homemade versions of popular packaged snacks at a fraction of the cost. The real breakthrough came a month into the new program when Maya came home with a different kind of story. Zoe asked if she could sit with me in the art room today, she said, unpacking her lunchbox. She said the cafeteria was too loud. I recognized Zoe's name. Her mother had been at our first parents' meeting. That's That's nice. Did you two eat together? Maya nodded. And tomorrow Theo might join us. Miss Perez said it's okay as long as we don't get too rowdy. Slowly, Maya's lunch group in the art room grew. Sometimes they'd eat in the cafeteria instead, testing the waters. There were still difficult days, comments made, looks exchanged, but the immediate intervention by staff made a crucial difference. The most surprising moment came when Emma approached Maya in the hallway one morning. I was volunteering in the library and witnessed the exchange through the open door. A mom helped me pack my lunch today, Emma said, her voice lacking its usual confidence. She said maybe you could tell me if it looks okay. Maya hesitated, then nodded. Emma opened her lunchbox to reveal a simple sandwich, apple slices, and a juice box almost identical to what Maya brought every day. It looks good, Maya said quietly. Emma closed her lunchbox. Maybe we could sit together sometime? If you want. I held my breath, watching my daughter's face as she considered this olive branch from her former tormentor. Maybe, Maya said finally. Not a yes, but not a no either. It was a start. 2 months after the school board meeting, I witnessed something that brought tears to my eyes. A first grader was sitting alone, his shoulders hunched as he stared at his worn lunchbox. 2 older boys approached his table, and I tensed, ready to intervene. But before I could move, Maya appeared. That seat taken? She asked, pointing to the empty chair beside the younger child. When he shook his head, she sat down and unpacked her lunch. I like your Transformers lunchbox. That's really cool. The boy's face lit up as Maya engaged him in conversation, effectively blocking the approaching boys, who eventually walked away. It was a small moment, but it represented everything we'd been fighting for, not just tolerance, but active kindness. That evening, I received a call from the district superintendent. Miss Johnson, I've been following the changes at Riverside with great interest, she said. The board is considering implementing your program district-wide. Would you be willing to help develop the framework? 6 months after finding Maya hiding in that stairwell, I stood before the district school board presenting our comprehensive plan for addressing economic bullying. Maya sat in the front row, proudly holding her lunchbox, the same simple white bread sandwich, apple slices, crackers, and juice box inside. The solution isn't to make every lunch look the same, I told the board. It's to create a culture where differences aren't weaponized, where a child's worth isn't measured by what their parents can afford. As we left the meeting, Maya reached for my hand. I'm not embarrassed anymore, she said quietly. About what, sweetie? About our lunches. About anything. She squeezed my hand. You taught me that. I swallowed the lump in my throat. We taught each other. The next day, we started gathering signatures for a petition to implement a universal free lunch program across the district. It would be another battle, probably harder than the first. But looking at Maya walking confidently into school, her simple lunch packed with love rather than shame, I knew it was a fight worth having. Some changes happen in dramatic moments, school board votes and policy reforms. But the most important changes happen in small moments. A child finding her voice, a parent learning to listen, a community deciding that kindness matters more than status. One lunch at a time, one child at a time, we were building something better.